Welcome to the Hockey Writers Union Junction, a weekly show from our Columbus Blue Jackets insider, Mark Scheig, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, he covers everything that happens with the Jackets. So get ready. It's time for another get-together at Union Junction.
Hello, Blue Jackets fans. You have reached episode 3 of the Union Junction podcast. Welcome. It is Thursday. It is September the 16th. And depending on when you're putting us on, it's either Traverse City Day or Game 1 has already happened. Again, depending on when you turned us on. Great that you're tuning in back with us here. Nick and Cody are joining us this week. How you guys doing?
Good.
I'm doing pretty good, Mark.
Yeah,
There's a lot of stress definitely leading up into this week, but definitely excited to see our boys back on the ice, even if it's just the prospects.
Even if it's and it's going to be exciting too. We're going to talk a lot about Traverse City. The team landed Wednesday night, getting ready for Game 1 against Toronto on Thursday. Going to be a lot of fun up there. So we'll talk about that later, but we're going to jump right into the show here. We're going to jump into some headlines. We got a lot to talk about, guys, here in 30 minutes or so, starting with probably one of the bigger stories that have come out in this part of the offseason, and that's the coaching change. So in case fans, if you missed it, Sylvain Lefebvre was hired to be the assistant coach, primarily working with the defense on the Blue Jackets. And then word came this week that he chose not to be vaccinated. And so more or less the Blue Jackets ended up firing him. So Nicholas, I'll start with you. Just when you heard that news about Sylvain Lefebvre, what was your initial reaction?
Not going to lie, I was a little shocked. Not because of the vaccination. I'm not going to get into any of the politics behind any of that. Mm-hmm. But I will say I was really excited to see him as a part of this coaching staff. As an assistant coach, he brings a lot of experience, and especially in an AHL environment. And this was kind of, he had some experience with Colorado, but this was another really big kick at the can for him. And to see him kind of working with the same age group, because we are going to see a lot of younger players on this Blue Jacket squad this year. There are a lot of other opportunities in terms of coaching for growth with the rest of the staff, but he was definitely a guy that we were looking at to bring a lot to this team this year. So I was a little disappointed, but definitely still excited to see what McCarthy can do now. Cody, what do you think?
I agree with you. For the most part, it was shocking and a little disappointing. I was really looking forward to see what he could do with this younger defensive core for the Blue Jackets. And I don't have much more to add. You pretty much hit all my points. It was surprising and disappointing.
I think also Jarmo's going to be a little disappointed because another bald man in the organization is out. We saw that, Lars is losing his hair, and I don't know. That's just a bad joke, I guess, on my part, but.
Well, listen, I echo what you both said. Shocked, obviously unexpected, but then it just, in my mind, there's questions. Again, putting the politics aside, like, did they see that this was coming? Did they know that this was going to be an issue? I mean, obviously, I don't think they foresaw this being an issue moving forward until the protocols came in. Everybody had to be vaccinated, and. Yeah, so it's another. It just seems like that when the Blue Jackets, as of late, especially given the way the last couple of years have gone, the Blue Jackets have had something going on, and now this is just the latest thing to happen to them. Or yeah, it is disappointing all around. The organization was looking forward to having him work with the defense to see what he could do to kind of grow into that role. But luckily for them, the whole Steve McCarthy, being right there, this is his chance now. He's familiar with the organization. So in that sense, it seems like it's going to be a pretty seamless transition. But, could this spin avoid? I guess my takeaway here is I feel like that there's a few outstanding questions about this. Like, did they see it coming? Did they do enough vetting? That sort of thing. And that's going to kind of lead into our next topic here. And I just wonder, and Cody, I'm going to start with you on this one. We have an assistant coach in Lefebvre that's been fired by the Blue Jackets for not being vaccinated. I know some teams, I think Carolina was one, Philadelphia was another, and I know there's some others that have come out and said that everybody's 100% vaccinated. But call me a skeptic, but I just wonder, is this going to be the only one that we're going to see? Or could we possibly see a situation where some other coaches, maybe some other players, I'm not saying a lot, but maybe a little bit here or there, is this going to be a trend that we're going to have to watch the unvaccinated at all?
It's definitely going to be a trend. You've seen it in the general population. Some people are just skeptical about the vaccine. Now, I think a majority of the players and coaches will get vaccinated because coaches want to coach, players want to play, and preferably they don't want to do so in a bubble or feel like they're endangering their families any. So I think a majority will get vaccinated just for that comfort of knowing that they can do it safely, but some will not. And it could cause outbreaks and could jeopardize the season at points, especially if cases continue to rise.
Nicholas, what do you have to say about that?
For me, I'd probably say that I've got a couple things on this. One is if you look at the stats out there around this issue, then those stats would lead you to believe that this will continue. There will be a few more. I wouldn't say that this is going to be a huge problem of losing staff and whatnot, but just that the law of averages on this one, right? So we could definitely see this moving forward. But the other thing that I would say in counter to that is that if you've ever played hockey, if you've ever been around a hockey dressing room, you realize that there is a culture to players and staff that, it really focuses on, team building. You put the team before yourself. Every single interview that you see with a player, they're always saying they're very hesitant to take a lot of the credit, which is why hockey players get a lot of sometimes a bit of flack over not being strong media personalities. So it's a similar in this regard. I think a lot of players, whether they agree or disagree, will, put this decision, as a part of their, team, their team mentality first. So I guess my roundabout way of saying, I don't know how big of a deal this will be, but I would imagine that we will see a bit more of this moving forward.
Nick, I'm right there with you. I have to believe that, if everybody does 100%, then, great. That's awesome. Wonderful. That's obviously the goal. It's just, I guess I'll believe that when I see it. I do expect there to be maybe an individual here, an individual there, that, for whatever reason, now they decide that they're not going to take the vaccine and that therefore that, they would not be able to play. And I know it's very interesting the way that they put the protocols this year, where if you get COVID while you're vaccinated, it's treated like a hockey injury. If you get it while you're not vaccinated, it's a completely different ball game where you can be put into an unpaid situation, and just, they've really tailored it for as many to get the vaccine as possible. So that still doesn't mean that everyone's going to get it. So it'll be really interesting to see what comes from this. Again, I don't expect there to be very many, but I do expect there to be a couple. And I think as camps start to open up here, as we get into the preseason, I think the light will be shed on those situations. So we'll see where all that goes. If you're just joining us, this is the Union Junction podcast. It's episode 3. Cody, Nick, and Mark are with you. We're just going through some headlines here. And look, the big headline is, again, later today, depending on when you turn this on, Traverse City is starting. And Nick, I'll start with you this time. Just first game going to get going here. What are your biggest storylines that you're going to be watching?
I think when we're watching a tournament of prospects, the storylines are the prospects. Those are the biggest things that we'll be watching as individuals, how they've bettered themselves, how they perform, from summer to summer. There's a lot of guys that I'm looking at near the top of my list, because I'm going to let you guys probably cover some of the bigger guys. Near the top of my list is Ole Bjorgvik Holm. How do you say that? Sorry.
Yeah. Ole, I have to actually look it up myself.
Yeah,
Holm is the last name.
He's a Norwegian with a very difficult name. For those listening who are maybe not familiar with him, he came over and played in Mississauga in the OHL. Columbus drafted him out of there, and he spent some time with Cleveland in the last year. A defenseman, not gonna blow you away offensively, but he is strong defensively. And Mark, I'm sure, got a chance to see him a lot better in Cleveland than I did in the last year. But from what I saw when he was playing in Mississauga, this kid could be an NHL player. And am I wrong on that? Would you say?
Let me get the name out there so we have it for the record.
Yeah, sure.
Julian Bjorgvik Holm. So Bjorgvik Holm, the hyphenated last name. As you mentioned, Mississauga, then Cleveland. I think he has a very interesting future. I agree with you saying, what kind of a player do we have here? He did not look out of place in Cleveland. I do expect that that's where he would be again this year. Now, he is only 19, so he's going to be one of those interesting ones where will he be allowed to go to the AHL, even though he played last year? Let's see what the rules state, depending on if he's considered to be a European prospect or if he's considered OHL, and then dealing with the CHL NHL agreement. That the CBA is complicated. That's complicated too. So, but wherever he ends up, he did not look out of place, and I do think eventually, with the proper development, he's certainly going to be an interesting player to watch. Cody, what do you have to say?
What I'm watching the most is Cole Sillinger and Yegor Chinakhov, and to see how well they can get the offense moving. Cause I want to see if Chinakhov lives up to the hype with his shot, and I want to see if Sillinger can come close to showing the offensive skill he has in the USHL. I know the NHL, much higher skill level, but I believe, 46 points in 31 games. He's a scorer, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can even come close to that level playing against some NHL caliber talent.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And then a little shout out to Jackets insider Jeff Sloboda. He was the one that the first tweet that I saw the lines. And if you want to tune into Traverse City for any reason, Tyler Angle on the left, Sillinger in the middle, and Chinakhov on the right. That's a pretty good and interesting first line to watch as these games get underway here. We'll see how long they stay together, but I think that's one player that I'm going to be really interested in seeing is the third member of that line, and that's Tyler Angle. And yesterday, it was actually on Tuesday night, we had an Ask Me Anything on Reddit, and I actually had a question about Tyler Angle, and it was, what do you expect him to be? And I thought it was a really good question, because everywhere he's been, whether it be in Windsor, whether it be with the Monsters, he's always exceeded expectations, but some don't really know what his true upside is. And the thing I'm going to watch for, can he continue what he's started in Cleveland, ultimately being one of the team leaders in goals and points. He just came in and just enjoyed all kinds of success. And I feel like that he can continue that, and he's going to have a chance to, take the next step in Cleveland. And then, maybe a year or two late down the line, he might get a chance in Columbus, kind of in a middle to bottom six role where he can do a little bit of everything. He can score a goal. He can play in all situations. He's a guy that you just can't count out. He's always exceeded those expectations. You wrote him off. He'd always come up and do the good things. So I'm going to definitely watch him. Stanislav Slovil, someone else I'm watching for sure. Drafted this past year, somehow fell to 69th overall. I think he's got a bright future in the NHL. He's going to, play on the second pair in Traverse City by the looks of things. And then the goaltending situation as well. We're going to talk about that later, but Jet Greaves, is the one that the Monsters ended up signing. He ended up missing his OHL year due to the pandemic. Now he's signed to an AHL contract with the Monsters. What happens if Daniil Tarasov, if he goes to Columbus via a call-up, or if he's ready to go? Someone's got to play net in Cleveland, and Brad Thiessen's now retired. I know Cam Johnson was signed to one extra year, but Jet Greaves might have a very interesting and important role for the Monsters this coming year. So those are going to be the things that I'm watching. Did you guys have anything to add?
I don't really. I mean, like you made a lot of we've said a lot of names, and those are the ones that stand out heading in. I'm also excited to see the ones who maybe we weren't expecting to make a strong showing, who really do show up, because there's always a couple of those guys on every roster who, really show up. So we don't know all the storylines, and I think that's one of the reasons why we watch the games.
Couldn't agree with that anymore, because this is the dream for these guys. They're to the point where they've made a prospects team of an NHL team. And so now they get an opportunity in front of management, coaches, to make an impression. So, they're playing with their lives on the line. And they said, this is why we're going to watch this tournament, because it seems like every year someone does step up unexpectedly. Let's see who it is this time around. So let's end headlines. We're kind of getting closer to the season. We're about a month away from the first regular season game already. So I figure we would start this week and take the next few weeks to talk about a different part of the team to get you guys ready for the season. And this week I figure we'd start with the goaltending. And as you know, now raise your hand if you thought that we were coming into this season with Elvis Merzlikins and Joonas Korpisalo on the same team. Okay, now you can put your hand down, you liars, because I don't think very many people saw this situation at all, especially given both going into a contract year, given the comments from management. Obviously, things happened over the summer that may have changed some things, but here we are. Now they're on the team together as of right now. So let's talk about that situation and what we can expect. So Cody, I'm going to start with you here. Just assuming that the regular season starts up here with Korpisalo and Merzlikins, who would you name to be your starter? And is there any particular way that the starts would be split in your mind?
I think I would go with Merzlikins, especially considering the fact Merzlikins is starting to seem to possibly be the next face of the franchise. I think Korpisalo and Merzlikins, both quality goaltenders, both starting caliber. I think it starts as a 50-50 split, but I would say about a few weeks into the season, Merzlikins starts to separate himself, and that starts to move closer to a 75-25 split.
Nicholas, what do you say?
I got to agree with Cody. I think Elvis is in the building and he is here to stay. There's no way that, well, I can't say there's no way with Jarmo. He could be so unpredictable sometimes, but I got to say it just makes sense to keep Elvis. While we've drafted and developed both guys, there's just, they're very similar in terms of, on your average night, but I think Elvis just has that game breaking ability to him where he can just, I guess see Corpy too with the 78 saves that night. So they've both got game breaking, but maybe at the end of the day, I think it's the personality in Elvis. And like what Cody said, Elvis he seems like he's going to be the next face of the franchise. If you look at all the branding on social media, even, I know that's not always 100% targeted, but, it really looks like they're focusing on Elvis a lot. And he's just got it, I think. But I agree with Cody. I think they're going to start off 50-50. But it wouldn't surprise me to see them go on like a play till you lose kind of deal, unless there's back-to-backs. Just ride the hotter hand. And again, things change all the time. If Elvis really blows it out, then he gets it. If Korpi really blows the roof off the place, then he gets it for a while. And again, if we see these guys in a playoff race, it wouldn't surprise me to see them keep both. There's so many things that can happen this year. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, it's easy to say that Merzlikins is going to be the opening night starter. I'm not sure about that. I can't say with certainty who's going to start, especially if they're both there. I mean, it was Korpisalo who started last year. I think it's pretty fair to say that Merzlikins ended up being a little bit of the hotter goaltender toward the end of last year when, the games really didn't matter much, but you could tell that he competed. He didn't give up. And I think that's really stuck with management. I think that means something. And that I do ultimately think that Merzlikins is going to be the one that's going to be the long-term answer there. As I just think that the upside that he has, I mean, if he's on, he has the potential to be one of the better goaltenders in the league. He has the athleticism, he has the compete level, but man, he also has that personality that just fans cling to. That I think, Korpisalo, don't get me wrong, great guy, is an all-star goaltender. Let's not take away from him. But there's that magnetic personality, and I know you fans know what I'm talking about when it comes to Merzlikins. It's the way that he handles himself. I just feel like that people will gravitate to him, and I think the Blue Jackets especially need somebody like that in their organization to be able to just gravitate even the casual fan to bring them in. I think Merzlikins is a better fit in that case. But it doesn't mean he's going to be the opening night starter. If they're both there, they have two really good options. It's 1A, it's 1B. They can go either way. Kind of leads me to my next question. Nicholas, I'll bounce it back to you. Do you see any chance that one of them is traded before the season begins?
No, I don't. I think I can't think of any reason why they would trade them both. It would have been done at the draft when all the other big moves were made. And so we're going to really look towards training camp to see if there is somebody who can take over in the short term, maybe around the deadline, or if they need to bring somebody back in a trade for one of these guys, if they are moved at the deadline. There's a lot riding on it moving into the season, but there's no way that I see not both of these guys on opening night. Cody?
I 100% agree, and for two reasons. One, goaltending depth certainly took a hit in an unforeseen tragedy that was absolutely terrible. And then also you have to look at the performance last year of the goaltenders was not up to par where everyone was expecting. And so that trade value has certainly decreased. If there's going to be a move made, it's going to have to be later in the season when the trade value goes back up. And when Cam Johnson or even possibly Tarasov has come in and maybe even played a few games for Columbus and has proven they can be a backup goaltender.
I generally agree with both of you. I'm just going to say one thing maybe to keep in mind, because I know that there's been rumblings that a team like Edmonton has circled around maybe asking about Joonas Korpisalo. You just have to ask yourself the question, if you're the Oilers, do you trust a tandem of Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen if you've got playoff aspirations to go toward the Stanley Cup? Do you feel good about that? And do you feel like that you could do better in maybe getting a Joonas Korpisalo? I'm not saying that a trade is going to happen, but I'm saying don't be surprised if a team comes calling, who knows, maybe a major injury happens, God forbid, during the preseason, or maybe a team, sees the preseason performance and isn't very happy about it. Whereas a team in Columbus that's certainly open and willing to listen, especially with the pair of goaltenders in a contract year. If you get the right kind of return, where you possibly get a goaltender back and maybe a first round pick or something like that, whatever the case might be, if it makes the team better, they'll listen. I ultimately don't think it's going to happen, but one phone call can change everything. So never say never. Last question about the goaltenders here for you guys. Cody, I'll start back with you. What kind of expectations do you have for them just in terms of the overall performance? Do you see a bounce back with Korpisalo? Do you see Merzlikins going to another level? Just how do you see this playing out in your mind?
I think that it is going to be a bounce back year for both goaltenders, if you can even call it that, for Merzlikins. He wasn't terrible last year. Korpisalo definitely had a down year. He had a 3.30 GAA and a 8.894 save percentage. That's not great, but we know he is capable of playing at a much higher level. Merzlikins for sure can kick it into an extra gear. We've seen it before with his shutout streak. But how many seasons ago was that now? It's been a long time with the pandemic and all that. I don't like.
Yeah, just a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a long time. But I think both will have a bounce back year, and I think we'll see Elvis push it to the next level a couple times this season.
What do you think, Nicholas?
I think it's going to have to do with Brad Larsen's coaching style, because Torts had a huge impact on his goaltender's performance, indirectly through the style that his team played. You know, they were so good team defense. We're going to have to see if Larsen, I know that they want to keep it in the same style of play. That's what was one of Jarmo's priorities in his new coach, was to keep, that same standard of play from his players. We'll see if that is in that same team defense first priority. And, look at how Bob's done since he's been in Florida. He has not performed to the standard that he played at when he was in Columbus. And we'll see if their performance was carried at all by that team defense. So this year, we could either see a huge bounce back from Korpisalo, and I'm sure Elvis is going to be on fire this year. I mean, with the strong words that he said, he's going to be motivated to succeed. We'll see if the team in front of them will allow him to succeed.
And I'll say this about the goaltending situation. The one thing that I'm going to watch with both of them at the start, especially at the start of the year, is how they mentally handle everything. Just think for a second about what Merzlikins encountered over the summer. You all know very well the story about what happened on July 4th. And to be able to try to recover from that. So that's one thing to know, is how's he going to respond to the tragedy. But then also you have Korpisalo on the other side, who, let's face it, he probably thought at different points that he wasn't going to be on the Blue Jackets and he was going to get a chance to be a number one. But here we are again with them both still together. Is he okay with that? I mean, ultimately he'll say that he's fine with it. Him and Elvis get along, but it's something I'm going to be watching. Just how do they handle being in a tandem again when maybe they didn't think that it was going to happen like this after the way last year happened? Like, can they respond to that? That's the thing that I will end up watching. And if they can pass that test, I feel like that they're good enough that they can steal a couple of games between them and keep the Blue Jackets competitive. But if for some reason, if they're not able to meet that, that could have some downstream effects. And it could lead to a bad season. We'll see where all that goes, but that's what I'm going to watch for, just the mental aspect of how both goaltenders handle the start of the season and beyond.
It kind of reminds me of if you looked back in Vancouver history with Schneider and Luongo. Do we draw any sort of comparables to when when Luongo wasn't traded? That whole kind of degradation of, their kind of tandem. Do we draw any comparisons there or no?
I mean, I would say no, because I think it's just there might be similarities, but every situation is different. So maybe you can draw a couple things off of it, but in the grand scheme of things, the way that worked out doesn't necessarily indicate that the way it's going to work out here. Cody, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I do not.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question, Nicholas. Maybe you can draw some things there. I just personally just think it's two different situations and really just going to depend on how they handle, especially if one's named the starter gets on a hot streak, all of a sudden 5-6 games in a row, other guy's sitting on the bench and he thinks he's a number one goaltender. How's he going to handle that? That's going to be very interesting to watch these goaltenders. I think Elvis is going to have a very nice year by the time it's all said and done. I think Korpisalo can have his moments, but he has a point to prove. He has to do better this year. There were some times last year where it felt like he lost it a little bit. So guys, let's put an end to this. I went to Twitter as usual. Thank you all fans for chiming in both on our question of the week and on our Ask Us Anything. And we have an Ask Us Anything question, and I will start with Nicholas on this. This is from Chad Elwood at Chad Elwood on Twitter. And he says, I've seen some great Kirill Marchenko KHL highlights over the past week or so. What, in your estimation, are the odds he comes to North America after his current KHL deal is up? Now, he says 22-23 in his tweet. It's after this coming season. It's Voronkov that's 22-23. But his question, what are the odds he comes over once his deal is done, Nicholas?
For my bets, thanks for the question, Chad, by the way.
Yes.
I think it's we're going to want him over here. As people covering the team, this is a guy that is exciting. He brings a lot of talent, and depending on who you ask, he's right up there in the top names in the Blue Jackets prospect pool. So I think we know the answer to if we would want him here. The answer is definitely yes. As people covering this team and looking at this roster, I would say it's going to depend on his KHL season. Okay. If he and his agent think that he's ready to come over, it's got to focus on what we think. It's going to focus on what they think is best for his development, in terms of, if he needs a year in Cleveland or if he needs another year over there. Cody, I don't know much about this personally. I haven't been super up on Marchenko's status because I know he's still got another year. We've got lots of time to look into this. Cody, do you have anything on this?
I've looked into him before, and I agree with you. It's going to be a lot of what they think is best for his development. But if he thinks he's ready, he's going to want to come over here and start trying to crack that Blue Jackets lineup. So I think if he does have a good rest of his contract and he thinks he's ready, he will be coming to Columbus.
Chad, I'll say 95%. And the reason that I say that, and I think maybe a little bit underreported, but maybe not so much, Chinakhov's already over here. Gavrikov's already been over here. Voronkov is a Blue Jackets prospect and could possibly be over here in a couple of years. So there's a certain familiarity aspect that may or may not be intentional on the Blue Jackets part. But I think ultimately Marchenko wants to go to the NHL. He's off to such a good start this year. And, as the guys just said, if he continues to have that kind of success, then if he stays over there, then he legitimately wants to, play in Russia, or, whatever the situation. I just feel like that he wants to take that next step, and he's going to have some people that he knows to do that with. So I put the odds at a pretty high number, around 95%. And there's always that chance that, maybe he has second thoughts for whatever reason, but the Blue Jackets definitely want him over here. I think he wants to be over here. I think that they're a match. So good odds on that one.
Would you say it depends on how Chinakhov is handled in his first year?
I would say no. Good question. I would say no to that, though. I think that Chinakhov is expected to have a little bit of a learning curve as he's over here in North America for the first time and getting used to the smaller ice. So it's kind of expected that there's going to be some bumps in the road. I don't think that's going to impact Marchenko's decision at all. I think it's going to come down to ultimately, what's his intention? Does he want to jump to the NHL right after that contract? Or does he have any incentive to want to stay over in Russia? Or, we'll come to find that out, but I don't think that it's tied to Chinakhov, though.
Okay.
All right, guys. Let's put a wrap to this. We've put a question out there, our question of the week. And it's for those who obviously go to the games as fans here, but we got protocols, we've got the pandemic, we might have finances involved. So I asked the question, do you foresee going to games more than you did before, the same as you did before, or less than you did before, and why? Basically, what has the pandemic done to alter your consumption of hockey? And we had a few answers to this. I think it's very curious to see where some people come in on and some of the reasoning. So quickly read a few of these. So it's at KGast13, Kenneth Gast. He says he's going to go less. I still do not want to be in a large crowd of people not knowing vaccination status. All games are televised. Also know those who sit around me at Ohio State hockey is where I'll get my hockey fix. So there's one opinion saying that he's not comfortable being in a huge crowd of people yet. Seems like that. I haven't heard of any. I know in Ontario, the OHL is limiting OHL arenas to 1,000 fully vaccinated fans, where you can have 4,000 or more in the building. I haven't heard anything attendance-wise in the NHL yet, but we might get some full buildings. It would not surprise me to see some people not comfortable with the big crowd. I have at Little Boomer CBJ says the same. A full season ticket holder and made it to all 16 last year. I plan my schedule around the Blue Jackets 82 days a year and sometimes more. Wink. Sometimes more when they actually make the playoffs. Not sure that's going to be a reality this year, but no, they can prove us wrong. We have at, looks like Champенko, it's Patrick N, says, I'm sure I'll go to more. I went to all but a couple games last year that were home games, but hope to get to an away game or two this year. So that's another one. How comfortable are fans willing to travel to games, especially on the road? Seems like Patrick here is willing to do a couple road games, which would be good. So at least so far, we got some fans that are not only comfortable going to games, but are comfortable traveling to games. We have at Savage Party of 8. Well, that's an interesting Twitter handle. It's Corey Savage. He says less. My 10-year-old's ice fees increased 50% this year. While USA Hockey and NHL promote hockey is for, quote, everyone, they know it's not. Ooh. And they know why it's not. Cost remains the biggest barrier for entry and retention, and it's getting worse. And he continues, in addition, what's going on with surcharges, taxes, etc. on tickets? I've turned down 2 concerts and a few baseball games due to Ticketmaster fees at checkout that were almost as much as buying another ticket to the events. One concert had a $9 facilities fee per team ticket. Let's talk about that for a second. Are tickets overpriced, real quick, Nicholas, in your mind?
Of course they are. Yeah, but they're trying to make up, right? There's a big gap they got to fill there. Cody?
Oh, they definitely are. If you're not in the Columbus area, this was a big debate last week. Ohio State was charging $160 per ticket for nosebleed seats.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of catching up, and it's very interesting to see, because finances are absolutely going to play a part of it. If you're going to charge more for the same product, but some people either, maybe the pandemic struck them or whatever their individual situation is, it might not be feasible for them to go. And so we'll see where that goes. I've got Nick Vogel at Nick Vogel _SSH. He says more because tickets, talk about the polar opposite, will be cheaper. And it's exciting to watch players grow. part of the reason the Sens are a fun to follow. Well, tickets will be cheaper, he says. Maybe in a different market they'll be cheaper. You know, I know the Blue Jackets just announced this week that their student rush tickets, they're going to be $35 for lower bowl and $24 for upper bowl. If you're a high school or college student, that's a pretty good deal in this environment to go see NHL hockey. So maybe in some places it is a little bit cheaper. So at least Nick says he's going to go a little bit more. Cindy Callahan at Beat Lady 3, she says, well, considering I decided to become a partial season ticket holder just before the pandemic hit, oh, ouch.
Oh, ouch.
I'm going more, but we'll wear a mask indoors when not eating and drinking. Well, I believe I'd be curious to see if the mask mandate takes effect here in Columbus and other places.
Mm.
Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I believe that it's already been signed into law in Columbus, so I'm anticipating masks at Nationwide Arena.
Mayor Andrew Ginther, I know there was a big deal that he was going to sign something in. We'll see what the Blue Jackets have to say about it. They haven't really come out and formally said anything. I know from a media standpoint, we do have to be fully vaccinated and masked, but when it comes to fans, I think that protocol will be coming, so stay tuned on that. And I'll just read one more here and we'll end the show, and it's from at 405_Winchester. They say to same to more. Blue Jackets sitting on my season ticket holder money for over a year. Oh, another ouch. Looking forward to $9 beers and chicken that tastes like wood. Oh boy. The hardest part about 15 days to flatten the curve is the first 18 months. Wow. So gosh, a lot to unpack there, but he had apparently the team's been sitting on his season ticket holder money. So at that point, you're probably going to go to games. So yeah, every situation is different. It'll be curious to see what the overall impact is at the box office. How many tickets are sold? Are they able to get sellouts? Are some people willing to go? Are they not willing to go? It'll be interesting to track the changes because of what this pandemic has done. Do they want to wear masks if they have to go out? A lot to follow there. Guys, any last thoughts on the whole topic of going to games?
I just say, people are going to do what makes them comfortable. Yeah. And whatever is going on in the world at that particular moment is what's going to affect attendance. So the attendance in the league this year, we could see a team that we've never seen lead the league. But also there are certain states which are just wide open. So those will probably be the ones that lead the way. But it's going to be definitely an interesting year attendance-wise across the league.
Absolutely, it will. Cody, Nick, always appreciate your time. Fans, thank you so much for joining episode 3 of the Union Junction podcast. Enjoy Traverse City. It's going to be a lot of fun. They play 4 games, even though the Blues and the Red Wings only play 3. They play Thursday, they play Friday. They're off on Saturday, and they actually play a Sunday game, and then they play a Monday afternoon game. And then when that's all said and done, by the time we get to that point, it'll be time for training camp. So when we meet together, we'll react to Traverse City, and we'll get you ready for the start of training camp. So until then, have a great week. Enjoy everything that's about to unfold, and we will see you next time here on the Union Junction.